All right, we are ready for our last section in this chapter, section 5.8, and this deals with simple interest. All right, so if we're talking about interest, what we're talking about is the money that either maybe the bank pays you or that you pay like a credit card for borrowing money, for using their money. And so that's what we're talking about. And here's this is this important formula. In fact, it's important enough, I want to put it over here. Interest equals PRT. You should write this down. This is a good formula. You're going to use this a lot, and it's used in business and everything. You should know this formula. And what we're talking about, I stands for the interest. So if I want to figure out the interest, I need to figure out, well, how much am I investing? What am I going to put in here? Or how much am I borrowing? Well, that is known as, that's P, that is known as the principal. So that's how much I'm going to either invest or borrow. And I need to know what's the interest rate that I'm going to get. And we're just talking about simple interest, talking about interest in a year. So R stands for my rate or my interest rate. And then T stands for time. And in our example, we're talking about time in terms of years. And so you will always need to make sure that we are in terms of years. So let's say, for example, that we want to invest $500. We can put it in the bank and get a rate of 6.25%. And we're going to do that for 3 years. And we want to know, how much money did we make while we did that? And by the way, if you can find 6.25% interest, go ahead and invest your money. That's pretty good right now. So let's take a look. We're going to plug it into this formula. So we want to figure out our interest, and we're going to take 500, and we're going to take that times the interest rate of 6.25%. But of course, whenever we do problems, we have to convert that to decimal. So we've got 6.25%. Convert to decimal, move the decimal over 2 places. There it is. So I'm going to take that times 0.0625 as a decimal, and for 3 years. And if I multiply all that out, then I end up with $93.75. So taking my $500, investing it, sticking it in the bank for, or wherever this is, for 3 years at 6.25% interest, I'm going to make $93.75 on the whole deal. Okay, so that's our first example here. All right, let's take a look at this example. And it says, find the total amount of money in an account where $95 has been invested at, all right, there we go. $95 has been invested at 7.5% for 8 months. So there's a couple things that we're looking at that are a little different than the last one. One, they're asking for the total amount of money. They're not just asking for the interest. So it's really 2 problems. You're going to find the interest. You're going to have to add that together. And the second thing that's different is they didn't give us years. They gave us months. So we're going to still use our I equals PRT formula, but we're going to do a couple of things differently. The first thing, probably the main difference, is we've got to convert 8 months into years. So we know that 8 months, there's 8 out of 12. That is 2/3 of a year. So that's where I got the 2/3 from. Once again, the 0.075 is from 7.5%, moving the decimal place 2 places. 0.075 goes as my decimal. 95 is my principal that I'm putting in there. So if I take $95, put it in at 7.5%, do that for 2/3 of the year, I'm going to make $4.75. That will be my interest. Now that's not the final answer, because the final answer said, what's the total amount of money? And make sure when you're taking the test, you read, are they asking for the interest or are they asking for the total? Those are key things to be looking for when you're taking the test. So I'm going to take my original, $95. I'm going to add in $4.75, and so my final answer, the correct answer, is $99.75. So we've done 2 different kinds of problems now. One where we just found the interest, and the other one where we found the total amount. Now we could have done the total amount on the one up above, so if you kind of see the last part of it here, it says $93.75, and we had originally added or started with 500. So we could have certainly figured it out and said, hey, our total is $593.75. So it's not like it would have been hard to do that part of that particular problem up above. All right, so let's take a look at one more here. And this one we're going to do something a little bit different in that this one we're going to find the interest rate. So we're going to find the rate that we're using. We're given all the other information. So once again, we've got our formula which says I equals, and my smartboard is kind of acting up here, I equals, thank you, P. All right, let's hang on just a second. Let me try this again. We're getting some issues with this. All right, I equals PRT. So what I'm given now is everything but R. So I want to calculate what that is. So let's take a look at this problem. It says Tanya borrowed $3,600. All right, so that's my principal. So let's plug that in, $3,600. We know that. To buy a used car, she will be paying $131.50 each month for 36 months. Find the simple interest rate for a loan. So now there's a couple of things here. We can't find, this doesn't tell me my interest right here. This tells me her payment. So let's figure out how much she paid altogether. So I'm going to, and I would do this on a calculator, $131.50, and take that times 36. So, punch that in on the calculator, and you end up with $4,734. Now, she borrowed $3,600. So how much did she pay over and above what she borrowed? Well, that would have been $1,134. So this is my interest. So you see how we had a little bit more work on that one. We had to figure out our interest. So that's going to be this number right here, $1,134. And we're still trying to find R. That's what I want to know. And T, well, it said 36 months, right? 36 months in terms of years would be 3 years. So now I have enough information. I've got one variable. I can solve for all the other things. I'm solving for R. So what I would do is divide both sides by this 3,600 and this 3. 3,600 here, 3. And then once again, I punch that into the calculator. And what we end up with is R equals 0.105. Now note that this is not my final answer. This is a decimal. I need a percent. So I need to move the decimal place 2 places and get 10.5% for my final answer. So that's the simple interest that she would pay on this particular problem. All right, now there aren't any real sample problems that were given, but I do want you to do a couple of sample problems. So I have these up on the board right here. So go ahead and stop the video and work through these 4 sample problems, and we'll come back in a little bit and work through them together. Okay, so let's take a look at this problem. And once again, we've got our formula I equals PRT. And the best way for me, the way that I do this all the time is just, I've got 4 variables and I need to find 3. And once I have 3, I can calculate that other one. So this, we're looking for simple interest, so we know we're going to be calculating I. And this shouldn't be too bad. So let's put this in here. So we've got $300, so 300, that's my principal. The rate is 7.5%, but I need a decimal. Move it over 2, and I would get 0.075 for my decimal. And it's for 5 years. Now, I need to do this much, and I want to see this much written down when you guys do these problems. So I need to see that, so that I know that you're actually doing this stuff. Don't do this all on the calculator. Once again, we talk about this every time. So once we calculate all that out, what we're going to find is her interest, or his interest, whoever, is going to be $112.50. over that time period. So you can see that's pretty good interest, you know, in 5 years, made pretty decent amount of money off of the 300 that they invested in there. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. And the next one says $230 at 12% for 8 months. And it's a very similar problem, so I'm going to set it up the same way. $230 at 12%, so 12.12. And 8 months, here's my key thing that I got to look at. 8 months, 8 out of 12, once again, is 2/3. So I'm going to use that in my calculation when I figured it out. And I'm going to come out with a total of $18.40. And by the way, if you're going to put this in on the calculator, you're doing these fractions, I would not recommend that you write that as a decimal, the 2/3. This is what I would do. I would say 230 times 0.12 times 2, that's on the top, divided by 3, that's on the bottom. It's going to give you a more accurate answer because the calculator will actually carry it out far more places than you would do it. So that's how I would do it. 230 times 0.12 times the top number divided by the bottom number, and that will work better. All right, so let's look at C now. And this one, the only difference is we're trying to find the total. So otherwise, they're pretty much the same. So we're going to do the same kind of thing. 660 times my interest rate, 12.0525, and 5 years. And if I calculate that out, the interest rate is 100, or the amount of interest, not the interest rate. The interest is $173.25. And so with that, then we need to add in our original, and we end up with $833.25. Okay. On D, what we're going to do is take our 385 times my interest rate, 2.126, 9 months, and I've got to turn that into a fraction here, so we're going to say 3/4. That's 3/4 of a year. And if I calculate that out, so it's 385 times 0.126, and then I'm going to do what I told you before. I'm going to say times 3 divided by 4, and I end up with $36. I get 36.3825, and we're going to round it to the nearest cent, so 38. So that's my interest, and then add in my principal, 385, so plus 385, and I end up with $421.38 for my final answer. All right, so there you go. Should be good. You're ready to move on and finish up this section. And then, of course, remember, you will need to take the test. And on the test, it is important that you get at least a C, 70% or better, in order to move on. If you do not feel that right now that you are ready to get a C, if you don't think that you have a good enough understanding, then there's several things you can do. One, go back and redo those particular sections. Do this other assignment on those particular sections that you did or that you didn't understand very well. Also, there is some good information out here. This is a great way. You know, we've done some quizzes, but you can also do some on every section. It just gives you some good practice, and you can see if you're doing it right. Khan Academy, we've done this, and some of these are highlighted on there. You got some links to some of those, but you can always do practice problems on there also. And then what C12 is simply kind of an online textbook, and you can go and find more practice problems and information about those things. You might have to do searches for particular things like percents and things like that, but you should be able to find that information. And if you just do a search on Google, you'll be able to find tons of practice problems if you need more. So you're in charge of your learning, and so you figure out what you need to get to that grade that you want to get on this test coming up. And of course, you know, I'm always here to help you with any of those things during class time that we can do that. Okay. So stuff.